Our special guest today started as a real estate investor. She's not just a real estate investor, though. She's also a mom and she's a specialist in human resources, team building. She's even a certified Clifton Strengths coach. She's going to tell us all about that today. She's my good friend, Bridgette Ruiz. Welcome, Bridgette.
Sunny, thank you so much. Good to be here today.
So happy to have you. And for those who don't know you, where in the country are you located?
I live in Southern California, been born, raised in Southern California, haven't lived anywhere else, although there's intentions to, who knows, maybe someday soon be in North Carolina. But in the meantime, I live in Southern California with my three children and my husband. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here today.
Amazing. So, for people that don't know the type of work that you do, tell us first, before we get into the deep dive of all of that, what is your professional background and how long have you been a real estate investor on the side?
Yeah, great question because I have been over 20 years in the human resources profession, and I feel in those 20 years, the skills that I've picked up have all prepared me for real estate investing. I said I was going to be an investor years ago when I started having my children. I bought our house in Southern California, and life gets really busy, right? And I'm sure many of us can understand you have a professional career and then trying to do your other passion work, right? The things that you love. And that's where, investing was always there. I talked about it all the time. My son, who was very young, would actually come back to me and say he was curious about investing as well, just because I spoke about it so often. I did all the reading, did all the podcasts, but nothing mattered until I joined the sub two community. And I've been in sub two for a little over 2 years, and that changed everything.
What were you doing career-wise that started to help you get insights into people and develop that as a real passion of yours?
Yeah, I love it. So when I first started within my own professional career, I have a business degree in human resources. I knew I wasn't going to be the numbers person. That just wasn't my thing. I did accounting in high school independently, but it just was not my thing. I knew it would be people. And at the core of who I am, I know talent and I see it in people. And I love to share those things with everyone as well. When I see something in them, and I just cannot help but share what I see and the beauty that we all have, because there are unique talent that we all have. You may not know it yourself, some of us might, but a tool like the Clifton Strengths assessment is a wonderful tool. There's so many out there, right? There's DISC, there's all these others, and Clifton Strengths is one of the tools, one of the options to be able to just do some self-reflection. And in my career, over the course of, over 20 years, I feel like I see talent, I know talent. And then when it came to real estate investing, it was how do I apply the skills and the knowledge that I've built over the course of my career to use in real estate investing? And I'm sure many of us on this call today are thinking the same thing. What if I haven't been successful yet, or I'm new to investing? What are some of those things that I bring, right? And if we don't have time in self-reflection, many of us, depending upon your careers, may have done quite a bit of self-development. Some of us maybe not, but it's a major, tool to be able to use and leverage to understand, how do I show up? And in these real estate investing transactions, how am I adding value? How can I add value? So those are things that this tool really helps. And, I took it 11 years ago. It's really hard to believe, actually. I think back and I'm like, how did I take this thing 11 years ago? I went back and looked today. I took it on April 19th, 2013. Almost, almost now, what? I don't know, almost 12 years. So, I mean, it just, time goes by so fast, but it's such a valuable tool.
You touched on some of the assessment systems there are out there, and there's so many really. Before we get into the details of why you chose Clifton Strings, what is the overall takeaway that any of us can get if we're going to go and study ourselves through an assessment, some type of personality assessment. Some people call it a personality test. I think assessment is a better word, but what is it that we're trying to understand when we go and do one of these things?
Yeah, such a great question, Sunny, because I think if we understand ourselves, right, the more we understand how we can contribute, what are we contributing to, say, a team, right? In these transactions, they say there's a team because regardless if you think you're doing a transaction by yourself, and maybe you are, right? But you still have to work with other people. There are transaction coordinators. There's, all of these individuals, the law offices that we're working with, right, to make these transactions happen. And so, regardless if you are working in a large team or you're just that solo investor, you still need to have some self-reflection, right? Some understanding of how we show up in order for us to create success. It's all about success. And these themes that we see within the Clifton Strengths Assessment, it's about what success we are able to accomplish, right? Once we know ourselves, once we understand ourselves. Um, I feel like I'm a humble steward, right? And I really care about everybody. Everyone on this call brings value. And I myself know where I bring value. I try my best to show up, right, in my best self. And so, I'm really fortunate to have had a career starting at Disney. Actually, I started at when Disney's California Adventure here in Southern California was opening. My very first professional position was the professional. Technically, I was in professional staffing, but there's casting, which, as one would suspect, casting is for all the cast members in the park. And so that at that stage of my career, and I have a really fun story I thought of um, that will match up to this. Maybe I'll get to sprinkle it in, but the just at the very beginnings, right, of my career, I started in talent acquisition. So I get to know people and their talents, and where do you fit in? How do you fit into a team?
Wow, Disney, I've heard many interesting things about how they go about hiring to create the culture that they have there and maintain that. It sounds like know thyself, that old adage has so much value even now, maybe even
Absolutely.
more value now that we have so much complexity in the world and so many potential things that we can do with so many people in the world. We need to know ourselves better than ever to really have a good sense of direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so these themes, as you had shared a moment ago, what foundation I want to share, right? Because many of us are probably thinking like, oh, great, you're creating some labels on me, right? Like, why are we doing this assessment and placing labels and judgments and so forth? It really is not meant to be in that space. There basically are five different the themes have these foundational understandings that we need to recognize. And so, uh, one, they're neutral, right? These themes, when we look at at some point, maybe I'll be able to share just what that, the list of themes look like, but they're neutral. So that means none of these are more important than the other, right? We all bring natural talents. There is no one like you. In fact, the top five. So for those, in fact, I'd be very curious if anybody who's on this call has ever taken this assessment. If you have, put a one in the chat. That'd be really helpful, just so that the rest of us in this call can actually see that other people have taken this and might know a bit more about themselves, right? This gives us a chance to interact with each other and use the language that makes it a little easier to talk about how do we show up. And so I'm seeing those in the chat, and this is great because it is a very helpful tool. Uh, and these themes are neutral, right? That means that there's not any one that's more important than the other. And there's a pendulum, right? What I mean by that is that It may show up in its glory and its most beautiful way, but sometimes when we get really strong, and I'll give some examples of this, high responsibility, for example. This will be a theme we'll talk a bit about because it shows up a lot. And in fact, it's one of the common themes. However, with high responsibility, if the responsibility theme, for example, is about doing what you say you're going to do and you actually do it, right? And we hear Pace Morby, for those of us in the community who are in sub 2 or Gator or what have you, we hear Pace talk a lot about do what you say you're going to do. You're the most beautiful person when you do this because people can trust you. They know you're reliable. And so with that, it's this pendulum, though, that if you're high responsibility, and I think, Sunny, you and I talked about this, you might end up where you just feel like you need to take over because you're just maybe not seeing everybody step up to it. So you just go, well, I'm just going to do it because I know I can do it. I just got to get it done because I just know it needs to be done. But then others on the team might feel like, oh, I didn't even get a chance because this person just took over. And so there's this fine balance. Sometimes we have to pay attention to how do we show up? And it can be in a blind spot. So that's the nuance of it. It can definitely be in a blind spot where we don't even notice. Yeah, anybody who wants to share, put it in the chat what your top 5 are, because then it helps everybody else. If you're familiar with the themes, great. If not, the single word gives a little bit of an indication, but I'll share, for example, learner. There's more to it than just learning. There's actually a continuous improvement that's part of the learner theme as well. So these themes are helpful. They're just tools and helpful for self-reflection and understanding. And then the second is they're not labels, right? So we're not here, like I mentioned a moment ago, we're definitely not here to label one another, but it just gives us an idea because you're not always going to show up, say, high achievers, right? That's a very common theme that we see. Doesn't mean that you're always in that space of being a high achiever, right? We're humans. We're very complicated. So, and then we lead with positive intent, right? That again, it's just a tool. It's a way to understand one another, and that differences are actually our advantages. If we were all the same, could you imagine how boring this world would be, how unproductive we would be if we couldn't have someone else who may show up differently than us, right? And then we need other people. That's the 5th one. So we can't do these things alone. We definitely know we got to do this with other people. So hopefully that helps lay some foundational understanding of these things, because it is definitely more than just, a word. There's more information behind these themes, but they're definitely important to know and understand, because the more we know and understand ourselves, the more that we can work with other people, partner with other people, and show up in the best light.
Those are great stepping stones for a foundation. And for people who are also wondering, especially many of us have taken other assessments, what is it that you enjoy more about Clifton Strengths versus some others that you've seen out there?
They're all unique, right? They all bring something different. It just happened to be the exposure that I had, right? Was with Clifton Strengths. Like I said, it's a long time ago. And at the time, I didn't even have a coach. I really realized how much a coach adds value. And I took it, I had a book, and it ended up on the shelf. And it wasn't until about almost 4 years ago, I revisited. And the beauty was that then I became a certified strengths coach because my employer had asked me to take the assessment, right? So I'd taken it at that time, probably about 11 years ago or so. And then I took it again. And at that time, I saw in the organization, by then I'd had a pretty long HR career. And when you're sitting in the seat that I sit in an organization, I've gotten used to seeing business. How does business, what shows up in the business world? And so I saw this opportunity. They were paying a consultant. And I said, well, why don't I get certified? I'd love to be certified. Let's do this. And we had the budget. I worked for a nonprofit, so it was strike while the iron's hot. And that's when I took the opportunity to volunteer, right? And one thing about our strengths is that we're going to want to do, if you've ever noticed yourself gravitating to work, right, or to something that you really, really enjoy, it energizes you. That's what this is all about, right? What energizes you? And for me, as I sat there going, "Ooh, I see this opportunity. I'm going to volunteer and see if they'll take me up on it." Sure enough, they paid that, paid my fees to become certified. And here I am. I've been spending time getting to know these themes more and more. Started to understand partnerships, right, and real estate investing, and really diving in a bit deeper to understand, how do I show up? Because I've learned some really, really, really hard lessons along the way. And what does a good team look like, right? What does a good partnership look like? And that's important to me. So, I've been spending a lot of time doing that, and researching and understanding, what does this look like?
So it's like you had a vision for it and now you're living into that vision. So congratulations to you. And in preparing for this discussion today, you mentioned that there are 34 themes, and yet they fall into four main areas. So what are those four main areas, and how did they help us start to understand ourselves without having to go in as much depth as you have so far?
I love it. First of all, Sunny, thank you. That meant you did some homework, because not everybody understands and knows that there's these four, what they call domains. And the domains are color coordinated. So when you take the assessment, there's this DNA strand, and it's color coordinated. And therefore, you understand these four buckets, if you will, right? Think of them as a bucket, but each domain, and there's so many different tools out there that follow the similar outline, is that you're going to see one of four buckets, if you will, and that these themes will either be, for example, orange, and within our assessment with Clifton Strengths, it's an influencer. And that's probably one of the rare, the least common for us to show up. And so when you find somebody who's in that influencing theme, you're probably going to feel their energy, because they kind of clear the way, and they influence, right? They make you feel like you can do and take action. There's executing, which is purple, and that theme is the person who's just go get things done. That happens to be where I sit. I sit in the executing. That's just, let's get it done, right? And then there's relationship building, which is blue. And that's really critical, as JJ influences that, as you do as well, Sunny, right? Is that relationship. You got to get to know people, right? And so doing that and getting to know one another, it's a real critical part of how we show up in the world, right? Are we trustworthy? Are we a person of our word, right? Those are all super important when we're building relationships. And then the last is strategic thinking, and that's green. So the strategic thinkers, they're the folks, the glue behind our, are these going to be deals, right? With real estate investing? Do we have a real deal in our hands? If we've not done the number crunching, we may fall flat in our face, because we've run off with something that we didn't analyze, we didn't know the data. And I love me a good strategic thinker who's ready to dive into some spreadsheets, right? And so we're definitely not going to be an expert in all areas. So we need other people, right? We need other people who are strong in areas that we are not, and be able to work together.
Well said. So we are intriguing people. You are intriguing people as you are talking. And I was wondering, do you want to cover this in any more depth before we take questions?
I'm glad thank you for reminding me, because we said this while we were preparing. One, as we start to take these questions, I am not a licensed therapist. I do have over 24, probably around 24 years of HR experience, but I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm certainly not giving legal advice either. I'm sharing just from my own experiences. but I definitely am here to help, and I'm happy to answer questions and continue the conversation. I love it. I'm seeing it in the chat. People are putting their top 5 out there because it's really important to know, how do we show up, right? And others are able to see that just with listing your theme, right? Give your top 5 and know that you're unique. Those top 5, 1 in 33 million could possibly have the same top 5. But here's the beautiful thing. They will not show up exactly the same, even if you found that person who had the same exact top 5. They will not show up exactly like you. You're unique.
Truly is like a fingerprint, isn't it?
Yep.
I love that there's that much potential for nuance. Obviously, in human beings, there's that much, but the system that one is using, some systems are so simplistic that they say you're one of these 4 colors. I took one thing like that. It said you're purple or you're red, and even that was useful because it simplified it enough where I could get some insight. And it's ultimately about self-insight, like you said. Yet, if you are working with a system that has such a rich palette of colors, so to speak, and you come to understand what those colors mean and how they mix for you to make you who you are, that is something that is uh, magical if you can really understand what it's telling you. So, with that, how about we start with some questions, Bridget?
Yeah.
Suzanne, you're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
Hey, so I thank you, Sunny, and thank you, Bridget. I am so glad to be on this call because I did take that Clifton strengths test, and it was kind of like a whole revelation to me. I kind of knew some things, but then it really helped. But my question is, I'm coming from nursing, a long career nursing, like 20 plus years, and I am new into this real estate space. And so this is kind of why I wanted to take these things because I want to know, how do I like translate all of those skills that I had over to real estate? Like, I want to add value. I want to bring value to people. And so that's kind of why I took that Clifton Strengths too. But I just want to be able to like bring those skills over. I mean, any tips that you would give me, suggest? I'll tell you my top 5:
Yeah.
positivity, developer, relator, futuristic, and harmony.
Oh, love it. You got a few blues in there.
Yeah.
Yep, that's great. That means the relationships are important, which makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're in a healthcare environment and you're
Hmm.
providing care for others, there's that need to really connect with
Hmm.
that person. And those are phenomenal, right? Because when you think about real estate investing, and we've talked about just the relationships that are built in this space, what I can share and what I've even experienced is that, it takes time depending upon how much, of the investing space or real estate space that, you bring. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that you can't work with other people who maybe have more of that experience, right?
Hmm.
And so when we show up with customer service skills, because you definitely have that,
Hmm.
right? You know how to work with people. And oh my, I could imagine when they're maybe in pain or there's other things, you're like, oh, they're nasty, right? Like you're just
Uh-huh.
doing your best to
Yeah. To
serve
calm down.
and
Yes.
try to keep your
Yes.
own self, right? Again, that
Hmm.
protection, the boundaries, and the things that we use even in real estate investing, right? Is like setting boundaries for ourselves. Uh,
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I always share, how long has your journey been with real estate investing?
Just since April of last year. And I'm new to Septuagator since November of last year.
Okay. Yeah. And it
So
takes,
fairly new.
right. And it takes a bit of time.
Hmm.
One thing that I would say and that I've experienced is that there are so many different ways to find success in real estate investing. And
Hmm.
it's overwhelming, I think, to many people. Sorry, that's my let's breathe meditation moment. That's I set that up so I take a breather. Uh,
That's great.
talk about healthcare and wellness, right?
That's right. Self-care is the best care, I'm telling you.
Yes. So I do a little meditation at 2 o'clock typically. But what happens though, I think for many of us is we get in here and we're so overwhelmed. There's so many different ways to make money. And again, I think there's a little bit of self-reflection of what are your goals, right?
Mhm.
What do you want to accomplish? And that may take a little bit of time. I've got to tell you, when I first joined, I did the thing, right? I did the go direct to seller phone calls. Did it
Yeah.
energize me? That's the question. Suzanne,
No,
you're
not
gonna
me.
know. Exactly. You're going to know if you love it.
Uh-huh.
Because if it energizes you and you're ready to do it every single day, which for
Hmm.
me is capital raising. I
Hmm.
love raising capital. But
Hmm.
that I did not know when I first arrived to sub two. No clue. I called direct to
Okay.
seller. I hated it. I did it.
Me too.
Yeah, and it's just painful. You will know if you're on the right track if you feel energized by it. And then
Okay.
also with those themes, right? So you know your themes.
Hmm.
In the workplace, you probably feel yourself get a little energized at times when you're touching on like the things that you really enjoy, right?
Hmm.
And you may feel that. So lean into those and then
Okay.
find the people who do the things that you don't necessarily love, but find them, the ones that do love that. And then that's how you supplement. That's how you, and this is part, there's actually, I was going to touch on this, is that there are 8 elements to a thriving partnership. And this comes from Gallup
Okay.
research. So this isn't the like Bridgette show at all. Gallup, for those of you who may not know, is a management company. And so you may have heard of Gallup polls or different
Mhm.
things in the business world, even in healthcare and so forth. There are lots of research backed by Gallup. So this isn't just a overnight um, kind of theories or what have you. This is backed decades of research. And so when we talk about these themes, or as we talk about, what we have learned, it's backed by research. And so Gallup has these 8, what they share are their key elements to a partnership. So I mentioned finding that other person who fills in the gap, right?
Hmm.
That's our number one kind of indicator of a good partnership, is that complementary strengths. Because you
Hmm.
can't be good at everything. I can't be good at everything. But we work with other people who bring the other things that maybe is not what we love doing, right?
Okay. Yep.
So
Well,
that's,
thank you.
you're welcome. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Julie, you're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
My question, I really wanted to know what your thought the top 3 to 5 attributes are or key things that you have seen in the high performing teams that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And that work is so much fun for me. Facilitating team thrive to see a thriving team for me, right? I just absolutely adore seeing teams that come together, right? Because you're working together. And that this is the second of the 8 elements we were talking about that I mentioned. There's 8. Number 2 is that common mission, right? Because as a team, and actually I was watching I don't watch a lot of TV, but yesterday my husband was watching and this like documentary on variety of like really popular bands and so forth. And there were a bunch of them, right? Different music professionals. But here was what I picked up. This was really funny. Like Hall and Oates, for example, for those of you in the audience, they were probably really popular in the 80s. They had lots and lots of hits. But I started to hear a trend as all of these different music professionals were talking. They talked about their common mission. Typically, it was the music. They loved the music. And they would go through the ups and downs. I mean, could you imagine your life just being publicly displayed and you had no privacy? Your life is really not your life any longer. And they would talk about this common mission. And that to me was, this is a thriving team. Your bandmates, your, colleagues in the workplace could be in a transaction with real estate. You have a common mission. And for me, I have now finally found what that looks like. And for all of us, I think the sooner we can find our why, and you can really find what's going to help you when it gets tough. Because these real estate transactions, there'll be some weird curveball, the thing you just were not expecting. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, like, what do we do? But you have to still have that why that keeps you going because it gets really tough. And when you get tough, if you're not willing to stick by that common mission, it's a lot harder to hang on tight. So I do love and adore seeing thriving kind of teams come together, and that applies in every part of our life, right? It's like your own family sometimes, in the workplace, in these transactions, all of it, every part of our life. We're working with other people. We're experiencing life together. So we have to kind of understand, like, how do I show up and, you know, what can I do to be the best that I can be? And to your point, right? Like sometimes you're just like, I just want to get straight to it. I don't want to have to go through like the whole small talk, but then know that, okay, well, others might need that, right? And you're just like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have the small talk, and then we'll
So
get
funny.
into the work. Like you might be an activator, right? I don't. Do you happen to know your themes, or have you taken just other assessments?
Yeah, the disc and the, everything that you do in higher ed. I can't even think of the names because I was in professional development and so on and so forth. So yeah, like I said, I always know the theme. I'm a cheerleader, CEO. You know what I mean? It's like, let's go. But there's none of that dig into how's your day, how's your baby, and I've really had to work on that. I just want to also say thank you because validating, I just found truly what my mission was. And I won't go to the backstory, but it's interesting. You always tie it, usually what your why is probably something with your history. And so mine is to empower women to make decisions from confidence rather than out of fear, and, go along that with all the things. And so thank you. When you're saying the why and everything, it's like, okay, got this.
I love that, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right because my why, it's the same thing. It's you. For anybody on this call, think if there's something that when you think back on life or you think about the struggles and the challenges of life, how do you help other people get through that challenge? For me, for example, sober living, right? That's my focus. That's my why.
Good job.
Because I grew up in a household where I saw this, right? This alcoholism. And I really think about the families, the loved ones who want this person to be healthy and thriving. And that's my why. But it came from a place of real struggle, right? And pain. But in our pain, we can grow and we can add value to this world that, I never thought was possible. And so good job for you too, Julie, for finding that like what you feel you can add, what value you can add to this world because somebody needs to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you so much. What an incredible time listening to you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I was just saying, I love that your 2 p.m. self-awareness alarm went off because that's such a great time to check in about are you energized about what you're doing in your day? Many of us get caught up in just getting things done and we realize, gosh, this actually isn't what I want to be doing in my day. So how do I transition to something that I would prefer to be doing more? And so talking about the why is perfect there. And also really intriguing that you mentioned Hall and Oates because they've been involved in a legal battle about their partnership for years now. And Hall, Hall accused Oates, who tried to sell his share of the partnership, his share of the music. Hall accused him of, quote, a partnership betrayal. So this is actually major news that's going on about partnerships
Really?
that has
I had
been,
no clue. I'm not
yeah,
even kidding. I had no clue.
yeah. And he said he was blindsided. He blindsided, and it is, quote, a partnership betrayal. And it's become quite a bitter battle, and it's been going on for years, and it's in the news, and it's really sad because these are two people that came together and made such amazing music, and they had this common mission of making amazing music, and yet some of the things that are being revealed now are that they never really had a personal relationship. They would come on stage and perform, but then they would just go their separate ways. And been hearing the same thing about Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, who many of us thought were just so close because they did such amazing things and won 6 championships, and now it's become clear that they were never friends. They never hung out off the court, and Pippen has such a huge um, amount of angst towards Jordan and says that they don't talk anymore and he doesn't want to talk anymore.
I did not know
So,
that. And that's right. I mean, that's
yeah,
it's interesting, right? To see how we show up and how we work together, you know? Even these people who have these like very very public partnerships that, it's a work in progress. It really is. It's like any any relationship, right? Any relationship. My best my best partnership is my husband. He's my best friend. 20, oh my gosh, I have to think about this. It will be 24 years in May, but he's my rock. He's my rock. And there's absolutely nothing in life, the ups and the downs. He is the one and only person who has stood by my side through it all. Best partner. I couldn't be more grateful. I'm fortunate. I'm so fortunate to have him, you
that's
know?
wonderful to hear. And that's an example of a partnership that internally is as good as it looks out externally. Some of these examples with Hall and Oates or Jordan and Pippen, they looked amazing on the outside, and yet on the inside, it was something completely different than what many of us thought.
Mhm.
So I think we all, or most of us, wanted to get into partnerships where we actually feel good. We feel like we're contributing, we're living what we enjoy doing, and it's producing those amazing results that we all want to have in terms of material success or whatever it is.
And you're hitting on number 3. This is beautiful. Our conversation has been so organic. I love it because number 3 is fairness of these top 8. Fairness, right? When you think about fairness, are you getting something out of it as well? Are we both working together, right? That we feel like we're both getting something out of it, right? That there's that common, again, going back to having a mission, but being fair while we're working with one another. And this takes a lot of work. There's a lot to doing things together. So, I'm glad we're kind of organically talking about these things because it seems to, you know, be working along the top 8 here that I was going to talk on. We're at number 3 already. Almost a halfway point.
Good. And I can see how that fairness would be potentially contentious because one person's idea of fair is different than the other person's, and they don't find that out until midway into the partnership where something happens, and then they start to see the situation from very different views, and then they have potential conflict. So
Yeah.
I can imagine how challenging all of this can be. Rob, what's your question? You're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
Hey, Sunny. Hi, Bridget. How are
Hi,
you?
Rob. Good. How
Hey,
about yourself?
yeah, I'm doing great. I did not know what to expect coming in today. Wow. I mean, I honestly, thank you. I mean, this has been honestly like a total couch session for me, and I'm just blown away. Your energy is so contagious. And I was reflecting. I was like, wait a minute. You and I like, I've seen you around the block in sub two.
Mhm.
So I've seen you there, but I'm like, we've made a connection somewhere before. So I reflected on my direct message with you, and you and I met up in the No One Left Behind challenge.
That's
And
what you
so
thought.
we kind of met and played tag in there, and that was that. But to finally meet you right now you're blowing me away. You are absolutely blowing me away, and I can't wait till I'm going to definitely schedule a one-on-one with you
Yes.
because everything that you're speaking of right now, because like I said, coming into Gator, coming into sub two, just really, I've been just trying to find my why, finding out I'm just trying to find them every day. Why? I'm trying to find out who Rob Howdy is. And every day it's just blowing me away. And today has just pivoted me in another direction towards you. And I can't wait to get to know you on a one-on-one basis. And I just want to thank you. Thank you. And I did have one question though,
Yeah.
because you had me in shock when you started right before talking about the 4 domains. What was the first color?
Yes. Orange. That's the
Orange.
influencers.
And that's the what again? I'm sorry.
Influencing. Pace
Influ-
Morby,
Yeah.
influencer.
Okay. No,
That,
definitely.
that example, I think, is enough for everybody in this. If those of us who are familiar with Pace Morby, you think about his energy, right? You think about
Oh,
how
yeah.
he shows up, you know he's an influencer, right? We talk about
Yeah.
that in social media, right? Who's the influencers? That's the influencing. You can feel their energy. You know that they're like leading the way. They push things. They get really, they'll definitely make their presence known. So influencers, you definitely get that energy. And maybe my executing is like coming through pretty loud and clear, I think, with, just my energy as well. Because I'm an action taker. I just go get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. No, once again, your energy is really contagious. I love it. I need it. Everybody in here needs it. So I can't wait to really get on a one-on-one and get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Colleen, you're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
Okay, first of all, you're awesome. I just love you. And two, if people want to schedule, she can do your Clifton Strengths, right? For a fee. You do that, right?
Right, right. So I am a certified strengths coach. And so I do, in fact, as Rob was sharing, just kind of like how he wasn't certain where his place is. I have spent my entire over 2 years when I meet with one-on-one with individuals and they're still trying to figure out where do you fit in. I'll spend some time just like, okay, what has your career looked like? What do you love? What do you energize? Colleen, I love you to death because you've just been my like right hand friend through so much. The ups and downs of this industry and what we do in real estate investing and working with partners and how we go about. I've fallen flat on my face, and I'm sure many of you can understand that, creating JV agreements and as you're partnering with people, I failed.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what if someone's in that position and they went down a path and did stuff as a partnership, but it wasn't really a partnership, right? They didn't take the time to do all the right stuff. What advice do you have for them?
Such a great question. Such a great question because it's so complicated. It's not just hey, and I love this. I love everybody's energy, but they'll say, let's do a deal together. What does that really mean? Like, no, you got to get to know the other person. This person's going to go through ups and downs with you. And you're going to have to go in the trenches, get some really tough things, get through all of those things together. And I get it. We have lives. We all have other things, but how we show up, right? How are we going to go through? And I love it because Colleen, I think you were the one who told me. In fact, it was you. I love you to death because you said, this example, I don't even remember where it came from, but it was, if you squeezed an orange, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you get out of the orange, right? And it was such okay, for everybody in the audience, if you don't know Colleen, you need to, because she is phenomenal. She has called me, and I'm hopefully you're okay with me sharing this, Colleen. She has called me in some of the roughest patches of my real estate investing career. And I literally was in tears. There was this one morning in particular, I was crying, in tears, crying. And she just happened to call me. But this is how genuine of a friend she is. She sat and just listened. I just needed somebody to listen. I was crying. It was really, really bad. And she was just there. She was just there listening. And that is, to me, one of the most important ways that we can show up for one another, right? And I am so grateful for you, Colleen, because you've been here through all my ups and downs in this journey, because it hasn't been pretty.
Yeah, it's I'm so honored to be your friend and to hold space for you. And when that is one of my things is this business, when you go into investing in real estate or money lending, whatever it is, when you do squeeze an orange, I got that from Wayne Dyer. He's been dead for a while, but I just loved him. But he said, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Does lemon juice come out? Does grape juice come out? No, orange juice comes out. And when we get squeezed, we find out what we're really made of. And when we squeeze other people, we find out what they're really made of. And the key is to never give up. And you need a good friend. Like Bridgette and I are really good, like good for sounding boards for each other. And you just need somebody that maybe not your partner that will hold space for you and be a cheerleader too. But because solo entrepreneurship and partnerships and all of it, it's like they don't teach you about all this in school. And like, and then most people, I can remember a long time ago, my mom has the best heart and I just love her, but I remember when real estate was really bad, like I don't know if it was 2008 or 9, she's like, well, Colleen, you should go back and get your teaching job. And I'm thinking, make about $20,000 to $30,000 a month at the time, right? Back then. And I used to make $50,000 a year as a teacher. And I had a kid in college and a kid in rehab and a kid in private school. And so I'm like, I don't think going back to my teaching job is going to, I mean, people don't always have the best advice for us that have W-2 jobs and that they've never been in this space of entrepreneurship. They have good hearts and they're well-intentioned, but she just told me, oh, is your credential good? You should just go back and get your old teaching job back. But then I would have had to pull my kids out of school and my other kid out of rehab, right? So I do think that do your research and then make sure you have in your partnerships exit strategies, right? Like if someone dies or gets incapacitated or divorced or whatever it is, we just need to have Pace was telling me this. We got to have clear exit strategies too. Or if they just want to sell it, let's say they just want out.
Yeah. Yeah. Such great points, Colleen, because the what ifs, right? Like, okay, I love that you're bringing this up because for those of you who are familiar and those of us who are in sub 2, hopefully we've taken the safety badge, right? And Mel Palmer. I love Mel. She's actually a partner of mine. I've actually had some really good partners in a variety of ways. And you mentioned something. We actually have accountability partners too. It doesn't have to necessarily be somebody who's doing a transaction with you. Like Colleen and I, accountability partners, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like
2 years checking in, making sure we're doing our stuff.
Yeah. I had to think about when did we actually meet, right? Like we started to think back and we've known each other for quite some time. But your accountability to one another and not giving up and encouraging each other when times are rough. And she's listening to me. I'm just bawling and crying. It was just an emotional day. And these partnerships, you show up not expecting some of these things. And so squeezing the orange, you're not going to get lemon juice, right? But humans are complicated and we do not know how we're going to show up when the tough times come. But you need to have, the ability to communicate with your partner. That's also one of the 8 elements, right? Is communication. Because if things are going rough in your life and you need to communicate, and that's critical, right? You can't shut down. You can't shut down when you're trying to work through these things. So it's part of being the best version of yourself in order to see success, right? You will have success. You just got to keep at it. You can't give up, and you also need to be the best version and work with other people. And, it takes time.
Colleen, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great
Sunny.
question.
Thank you.
Naomi, you're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
Hey, Bridgette. So I've taken multiple different assessments and they each have their own nuances. And I'm bouncing back after a failed partnership. Just wondering, how can we use this Clifton Strengths assessments to help really identify that correct fit for a partner?
Yeah. Oh, Naomi, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I'm pretty confident there's others on this call who have experienced the same, myself included. And it's a journey, I'm sure as you've experienced. I myself, when Sunny and I first started talking that we were going to cover this topic, I literally was still in the emotional roller coaster of emotions, because you want success. You probably saw success with that other person, right? At some point, there was excitement. There was like, this is going to be great. And then maybe it's not. And then when it's not, it's like, how do you know what to do? How do you know how to find the right people, right? And so the assessment, which is a great question, because that's the journey I'm going on myself, right? Is I'm using this tool. And this is what I think kind of Sunny probably picked up on this when he and I met, was that I started to share that part of my due diligence, part of my process as I'm identifying who I might work with, is I'm using this assessment, right? And so I do have an advantage because, of course, I do understand these themes, and I know, like, how do they show up, right? When you're looking at the results. And one of the things that I learned, because I've been trained to look at the top, because that's what Gallup encourages, right? They say, go look at the top, because for you, that's how you're going to actually create success. It's not what's sitting at the bottom, which many of us, when we're in a workplace, if you've ever had an employer who's like, well, yeah, you're not so good at, this certain skill, so you need to learn more about it. Well, okay, great. I can learn all you want about it, but I probably will not be able to make really, think about the athletes, right? Think about professional athletes, baseball, for example, right? Or even football, but let's talk baseball. If you're a coach, or I'm sorry, if you're a pitcher, the pitcher's not out in the outfield, right? They're trained specifically to be a pitcher, and not only just a pitcher, you might even have a closing pitcher, right? You might have different times that you come into the game. So, when we identify how we show up, but also, how can these partnerships possibly work, or what might be some of the potential landmines? Here's what I encourage. So here's what I learned. Because I was trained to look at the top, I ran into some shrapnel. Let's just call it, like, how do you figure this stuff out? It takes time, right? It was the things that sat at the bottom that I that's where I ended up standing on a couple of landmines and going, that was the issue in this other person. But if you're having conversations, and again, it's time, right? You're building these relationships and talking about them. You might even share with your potential partner, hey, these are things that I might have some issues. Here's another tip for everybody on this call. Use ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is your friend, because it can help you identify what might be some of our potential problems, what might be something that could come up. You'll never be able to identify all the potential what ifs. We've already heard all of this, right? Pace Morby has talked about it, but we do our best, right? ChatGPT, plug it in, right? Have them take their assessment, right? I myself, I'm very, I've changed my wording, because in 2024, I would use the word, I'm excited. And there was a lot of emotion behind all of that. I'm learning to control emotions, right? What I found in 2024, and what I've learned in 2024 is really setting me up in 2025 for more optimistic, more hope, right? Like I have a new potential partner, and I'm really excited about this relationship. I say excited, but I'm saying more of an optimistic and hopeful, feeling that we're heading on the right track, right? But I can feel differences in how this person shows up for me. Like, they wanted to know a little bit more about my strengths, whereas my partner before never really asked. And I was like, oh, okay. We worked really well together. I didn't see there was any potential red flags or things, at least. And now, when you sit back, I don't know if you've done that when you're looking back on those partnerships, right? And what were some of those little red flags? Mel Palmer talks a lot about that, if you're not familiar, she focuses on due diligence, right? Not only just the deals in real estate, but the people as well, right? And that's, for me, part of my process. And it's funny because my new partner, I've invested a lot of time, right? I'm asking questions and saying, hey, I want us to be successful. Help me understand a little bit more about you, right? Have a lot of conversation around these things because we just want each other to be successful. That's how it should be, right? Those partnerships. We want each other to be successful. And friends, as we've heard Pace tell us, right? Because he's kind of all of our mentors when we think about this, right? Are you a coupon, right? Like, are you the person who's like wanting the discounted price versus like, hey, you're looking at a partnership and saying, I really want you to succeed. I want to succeed. Let's do this together. Like, I'll take a bit of the pie versus the whole pie or none of the pie. But how do we do that when we understand one another? And so there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of invested time, and the assessment can help you. And like I said, ChatGPT is also a great way. Like plug in some of those things and ask it. I'm part of that as well, right? I'm always helpful. I definitely have built a side business around this as well, where I help people just kind of work through thriving teams as well. I've done and facilitate sessions with teams because you want to see how we show up. How does a group show up? And that could be 2 people. It could be a much larger team.
Naomi, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And thank you so much for that brilliant advice. I really appreciate everything you're sharing with us.
Alex, you're on live with Bridgette Ruiz. What's your question?
All right, Bridget, I'm gonna keep it real short and sweet for you guys. I know it's Saturday, and I really appreciate your time. Pretty much, I guess what my question would be, I reached a point in my business where I clammed up based off really bad partnerships. Like I'm doing the lone wolf thing. I refuse to work with anybody else, and that's why I joined this call. But I guess my question would be, I mean, if there's any literature you recommend or something to kind of really open up that mindset to where, look, not everybody's out here to get you. You know, I want to get back into that rhythm that I had in the beginning, trust people a little bit more, and just build better relationships. And I guess I'm too trusting. I'll let anybody just come in and it ends up ugly. I think you know where I'm coming from, but I don't know if there's anything else that you guys can recommend as far as, you know, get either literature or something that mind to open up the mindset, I guess, and be a little bit more, I don't know, get out of that clamshell that I just feel like right now I can't trust anybody but my spouse. And, that's where I'm at right now.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing that because you're not alone. Uh, you're not alone. I completely understand. I was sharing that, Sunny has been a phenomenal host in preparing for today. And when we were talking, I literally was having some real struggles myself, right? And this industry is not for the faint of heart, right? Like, I completely understand where you're coming from. And it's difficult when our trust has been breached, when we may have positive, and like you, I've done the same. I've trusted, thinking like, oh, we said we were gonna do this, and then somehow it didn't, right? And then all of a sudden, all of the work that you think you're doing together, gets derailed or however that all plays out. But I completely understand. So thank you for sharing our vulnerabilities, because I too have fallen straight on my face without having JV agreements. And I would say JV agreements, that takes time, right? Like when
Right.
you do find somebody and your compliments, right? So for example, as we were talking about this assessment, I'm an executor, right? I know that about myself. I just get things done. And so the people that I'm looking for might be more strategic thinker, because I may not like the numbers and the detail and the data. And for yourself, tell me a little bit. I'd love to know a little bit more about you. How do you think when you hear about those 4 different, right? So you've got relationship building, you've got the data, the numbers, influencer, or what was the other one? Influencer, relationship building. Um,
I guess I'm definitely the data guy. I came in, I come in as a sort of like an integrator, I guess. I'll bring in the leads, I'll bring in the infrastructure. I'll try to make sure it's a deal before we proceed. And that's, I guess, where I'm at in my skill set.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing, because you know what, Alex, there could be somebody in this group. How many are we now? We're still at 45 people. There could be somebody here who could complement you, right? They may be more relationship building and you're just the numbers. You just know if it's a deal or not. If, the analytical side of it, like me, I would love to work with someone like you, right? Because you have the knowledge, you have numbers, you're following the numbers, and somebody like me I will get the stuff done. And these themes, what we do know is that there's complementary themes. So when you've got like a high achiever, because high achiever is one of the number one themes that we see, like statistically, we know that one's really common. And I could pretty confident a lot of people on this call can probably see themselves sit in that space. So, Alex, I think JV agreements, right, that have to be put in place. And
Gotcha.
You can even share with them, hey, I've had some trauma, right? My partner, my new partner and we've talked about this too. We're like, there were some really hard lessons learned in 2024.
Oh, yeah.
And we're taking it slow, right? It's like we hear, right? It's a relationship. On your first date, you're not going to go and say, I'm going to marry you, right? You want to take a little bit of time, get to know each other. Start that JV agreement. Just start drafting it. Have some conversation around it. Mel Palmer is a great resource. That go look up what she has to offer, right? She might be a good place to start. Even, help anywhere you can find to understand the other person, understand yourself, and be able to have that conversation, because it's a really big commitment that we're making in these transactions. I read like I said, I've become now a connoisseur of partnerships because I want to know, what do these things look like? This is my learner, definitely 100%. Like, what are good relationships for, partners? And so if you're looking for a book, this one is by Tony Robinson. And what's funny is that I didn't even know this. I was listening to the audio because I was doing a lot of driving this week, and they talk about having an assessment. Do an assessment. They do DISC, I think.
Okay.
But these assessments are great tools because you get to know yourself, and then you get to know the others that you're working with. So I completely understand, Alex.
Thank you. It's been great being on this call. You guys really opened my eyes to, hey, not everybody's out to get you. Okay, kind of get over it and move on, and something go. I feel like in the future, the right partner will come by.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you, guys.
Bridgette, it's been so amazing having you here today. There's been so many great questions asked, and you've provided so much insight for people. If people have more questions, if they want to reach out to you directly, which I know some people are already expressing interest in, they're like, how do I book a meeting with Bridgette? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Instagram's a great way. And you can find me, my last name, Ruiz, RUIZ_Bridgette. You can find me on Instagram. I have a thriving LinkedIn because, of course, my HR career, right? My profession, and all my recruitment, because I have been a recruiter most of my career. And then, of course, I do, have a YouTube channel, all that kind of good stuff. If you look me up by my first name and last name, you'll see a few. All interviews of other real estate investors in our Clifton Strengths, trying to resuscitate that. I think there's a lot that we try to do in this space. The high achiever in me definitely juggles a lot of balls. So, it's a balance we all have. I'm sure we're all trying to do many things. So social media has been part of that too, as I'm kind of exploring the space more and put myself out there. It's uncomfortable. So hopefully if you're out there listening, thinking, I can't do this social media stuff, I get you. Just try
And
to
speaking of social media, in a world where 90% of people, or some very high percentage of people, are chasing the deals and not the relationships, what's the value of a group like JJ's for helping us build the right relationships?
I love it. I love it. I love community, first of all, Sunny. I think this one question is we talked about accountability partners, right? And partnerships. The same is said about our community. So, for example, right, where some of us are in sub two, some of us may be in Gator. I myself, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to health and just kind of wellness and well-being. And guess what? I have another community all focused around health, right? Because I just know that I need other people to hold me accountable. I feel more success is done when we are doing it with other people, right? And being able to be there for one another, build those relationships. And even in my health journey, I was sick. We didn't know what was wrong with me. And it took me a long time to feel like I was getting my wellness back. But I did it with other people. And that's why a community like this is so, so important. You build relationships, you become more accountable because you say, oh, wait, this is the person I need to show up like. And when you're around other people who influence and help you, who are going along in the same direction as you, super powerful.
So well said. And with that, make sure you grab Bridgette's info so you can reach out to her. If you're here live, we're about to go into live networking with Bridgette. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to click like and leave a comment about a takeaway you got from this. I know Bridgette will love seeing that love, and we certainly appreciate it. So thank you for watching Flipside Out with JJ. We will see you soon in the world of virtual networking. Bye, guys.